What's up, everybody? My name is James, and I just want to welcome you to Tehillah Talks. What this show is simply about is having honest, real conversations about life, about culture, about church, about faith, and many more things that I think you will enjoy engaging with. So welcome to the show. Hope you enjoy it. What's up, everybody? How y'all doing out there? My name is James with Cody, Mandy, Jer, and you are with us for our episode 6 of our Tehillah Talks podcast.
Already 6.
Podcast.
That's crazy.
What do you call it? Is it a vlog? Is it a podcast? Is
Video
it a
podcast.
YouTube channel?
Video podcast.
Is
Right?
it
It's a video
Is that
podcast.
the technical term?
I mean, it's a conversation.
a video podcast?
Yeah.
Landon, what do you call that over there? Podcast.
Just
okay.
a podcast.
We're going with the
Podcast with a
podcast
video.
people.
Yeah.
Okay.
With a video
podcast.
Podcast with a video.
Yeah, exactly.
Tomato.
Visual aid.
Potato. Which
If
one
you
is
want to
it?
see our lovely faces.
Is it pasta
You know,
or
people
is it
have told me
pasta?
actually that I have a face for radio.
Wow.
And a
voice.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Just a face for radio.
Might be the
Face
most
for
accurate
radio.
thing
You
in
got it.
2020.
Does that mean you have an ugly face?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they
Is
meant.
that what
I
it means?
disagree.
No, because I've heard
Seriously?
the same thing, and I definitely
No,
don't
that's
have an ugly
definitely
face.
No, that's
what it
definitely
means.
what it
Okay,
means.
so we
100%.
both have
Definitely
an
an
ugly face.
insult.
That sucks.
It's okay.
Great.
It was a
You're
joke.
being
I just
complimented.
found out. You know the worst kind of insults are the ones you have to think about and you get years later?
Yeah, the ones you thought you carried
He
for
said,
years
"What
that you were
about
being
me?"
complimented.
years. I carried this for years.
I know.
Okay.
Forgive them, Jer.
I
Didn't
do.
Remember episode 3?
We're going to have a great chat.
Anyways,
Oh my
welcome.
gosh.
We're so excited to chat about the Good Samaritan
Yeah.
parable this time around. That's what we're doing, right?
Yeah, we are doing the Good Samaritan.
Okay, tell us a little bit about it. You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so for those who are joining us, or maybe you've been with us along the way, we're in the middle of a series where we're looking at what we're, I think, amongst us calling stories by Jesus.
Come on.
As N.T. Wright says, and we said this early on, Jesus is in the backwaters of Galilee. He's going around Jerusalem. He's campaigning for the kingdom of God. And he gives campaign speeches for the kingdom, but they're kind of strange campaign speeches.
Right.
They're very cryptic stories.
Confusing.
And I think the stories are, Jesus often does this. He speaks in kind of mystery, in such a way that we actually have to work to figure out what he means. And I think more than that, he tells stories because stories evoke more of our imagination. And so what we've been doing is we've been looking at these stories that Jesus tells through the lens of justice. That actually, if we pull back some of the veils in the ways that we've learned to think about these parables, we find that Jesus is often talking about what the kingdom of God is like. And the kingdom of God is so justice-oriented. Jesus is telling us stories about what it looks like to be his people.
Somebody.
And so that's the series we've been in, for those of you who know. And so we're going to look at this parable of the Good Samaritan. At least that's what we have known to call it.
Yes.
And then we're going to have this really great conversation about justice in this story by Jesus. So I'm going to read the story, and then we're going to dive in together.
Let's
so
do it.
this is the story, set up the context, and then we'll dive right into the parable. So a lawyer stood up and put him, that is Jesus, to the test. And the lawyer said this, "Teacher, what do I need to do to inherit the life of the age, or eternal life?" And Jesus said to him, "What's written in the law? How do you read it?" And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind." So he quotes the Shema, Deuteronomy 6. Then he says, "And you will love your neighbor as yourself," Leviticus 19:18. And he said to him, that is Jesus said, "You've answered correctly. Do this, and you will live." But wishing to justify himself, this is what this guy says. He says, "And who is my neighbor?" And then Jesus tells this story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell amongst robbers. And they stripped him and beat him and went away, and they left him half dead. And by chance, a priest was going down on that road. And when the priest saw this man in the ditch, he passed by him on the other side. Likewise, a Levite also, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him. And when he saw him, he felt compassion and came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. He put him on the back of his own beast, a donkey or animal, and he brought him to an inn, and he took care of him. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay to you." And Jesus says this, he ends the story. "Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robber?"
It's obvious.
And he said to him, "The one who showed mercy toward him." Then Jesus said, "Go and do the same." Okay, so let's start where we always start.
All right.
When you hear this parable, what stands out to you, or maybe what have you thought about in the past? Maybe how are you thinking about it differently now? Anything's up for grabs.
Man, I just think about all the times I've passed somebody on the road stranded,
Right.
hood up, lights flashing, and I've just said, "See ya."
Not my
Got
neighbor.
somewhere to be.
Right, not my neighbor. Yeah,
I got somewhere to be.
Right, of course.
I got
The
things
south.
to do.
I'm in the
Yes.
north right
What
now.
if they're dangerous?
right.
What if, all the
All the things
that's,
that go
that's
through
what
your
I
head.
think. I'm just like, yeah, like I've picked up a couple hitchhikers in my day, but it's just like that's what I think about. I'm like, oof, might be the priest.
Right.
Right.
Mandy's the Levite because she's a worship leader.
Facts.
Who does the same thing, so thanks.
Yeah, of course. What about you, Mandy? What comes to mind, maybe, or what has come to mind when you hear this parable?
Yeah, I mean, the conviction for sure is like how many times have I walked past someone in need, whether it's like somebody on the street, some like pulled over somebody, maybe a homeless person, or even just like a person in my own life at school when I was young. Like there's just so many times I think where we neglect the opportunity to show love. And I think that like that's convicting when you read this story. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
What about you, Jer?
Think of a few things. First of all, I thought about how much more real and meaningful this story is reading it. Not meaningful, but convicting, I think is the right word. Reading it now versus when you're a kid. And I'm like, man, every time we go through these things, I'm like, the gap of like when you read it as a kid's story versus like what it means in your everyday life.
Sure.
Like we've been talking about the kingdom of heaven actually here on earth is like even more so convicting because I'm like, I thought of it just as like, oh, be a good person.
Right.
Like help people out. But then
Yeah.
you just end up helping when it's convenient for
Right,
you.
of course.
By nature. But I'm like, Jesus just said, go and do the same.
Yeah.
So like every single time I am in that encounter, I should be doing the same. And I'm like,
Right.
oh man, I have not
Swerve.
done that.
It's
I work
fun-
at the mustard seed.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I don't. Like, I know you. Not this time. Or just like, you're not my neighbor. I live, just all these different,
Right.
like all these stipulations or things that I can be like, oh no, this time it's appropriate and this time it's not.
Right.
It's just, it's
When
overwhelming.
I hear the story, like a lot of these parables for me, one of the first things that comes to mind is that moment with David and the prophet Nathan. When David has committed adultery with Bathsheba. I mean, he's basically coerced her into having sex with him. I mean, we're talking about a grave injustice towards her. And then he murders her husband. And then Nathan comes and tells this parable about a little ewe lamb, and David is indignant. He's so mad. And I feel that way when I read the story. I think, how in the world could they pass by this guy in a ditch?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Nathan's like, that's you, bro. You're the man. You're the one who stole the ewe lambs. That's the first thing that I think of for me. Maybe coming back around, one of our big ideas for this particular story of Jesus, and then I'll ask you guys a question, is that compassion can be felt in the gut. You can feel compassion, but mercy needs to be enacted with the body.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just feel compassion. You actually have to demonstrate mercy. But let's start here. This guy gets up and he asks a pretty common question. Right. Who's my neighbor? I think this is another way of saying who is not my neighbor or who does not deserve my love. So maybe let's start there. I think we live in a moment where we talk about love a lot. Jesus talks about love a lot. Oh, yeah? And I think that easily our cultural ideas about love get conflated with what Jesus means by love. So when you think about this here, about loving your neighbor, what do you think about there? When someone says to you, who is my neighbor,
Yeah.
the easy answer is to say, well, everybody is.
Right.
But how does that actually work itself out? Maybe some instances where you've seen this same story in play, either in youth group or in church, maybe in your own life. Or when you think about, what advice do you give to somebody when they're thinking about love?
I think in times like your neighbor is kind of whoever God puts in your path, like whoever you come across, whoever comes in, like if you're on a road, like whoever comes in front of you, that person is your neighbor, right? And so, yes, in a sense, it's everyone, but that's kind of vague and overwhelming to think about, right? But it's like if you're confronted with someone or something or a situation, then the person that is pertaining to that situation becomes your neighbor.
Right.
That's what I think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give it in my own mind then, this is for each of you. I have this schema, and when I think in the back of my mind, I think, well, I love these people really well, and I'm enacting justice over here, but I hate this person for what they did to my friend, or I hate this person for X, Y, or Z reason, and we justify that in our own minds. We're actually just like this man, trying to justify ourselves and say, well, I'm good towards some people, so it's okay if I'm bad towards others. I mean, how have you seen this play out?
I mean, the polarization of our society, right? Like we love really, really hard towards the people who we align with, right? Whether that's politically or like just when it comes to like social structures, or like even when it comes to social justice, people who we align with or who care about the things that we care about, we love them really well. But the ones who don't, we see as the opposition. And it's much more difficult, but also much more uncommon to see love shown to people who blatantly disagree with you.
Right.
Yeah. I think, especially right now in our context, I think there's so many examples of how you see it. I think I've had even conversations recently, just thinking, one of my profs at PBC, Portland Bible College, said that like a true sign of being like filled with the Spirit is a supernatural ability to love. And I think a lot of the way we like love, like you said, Mandy, is just based on our like what aligns with us, or what we see as valuable, or what we feel empathy towards, or like what is convenient to us. But what Jesus calls us to is like way beyond ourselves or our ability to love. Like it should be appalling to the people around you of like, why are you loving that person? And even in the story we see that like the Samaritan and the Jew is not like, it's like, what? It doesn't make sense. And so even like in prayer, even like having conversations of like people, some people praying for Trump or praying for
How
Obama.
could you pray for him?
And it's like, yes, we'll say that, like, oh, yes, we pray for
For
all
our
of our
leaders.
leaders. But oftentimes the prayer is like really just what we want to see happen.
Right.
Like, God, would you make this person the president because we, or whatever, or just all these different kind of prayers. But I'm like, really, we should be able to pray if the Spirit is active in our lives, or love the same way for that person in the ditch, dead, just as much as the enemy. Like we were talking
Half-dead.
about, or half dead, yes. Or like that we talked about a few weeks ago, the cop, remember James, the cop that shot this guy's brother, and they were in the court, and then he like in front of everybody in his family went and hugged the cop and said, I forgive you. Like that is what it should look like. Not like you hurt us and yes, I forgive you, but you know what I mean? Like it's really beyond ourselves.
So when I think of the way people hear this, I want to stay here for a bit, because I think this is something that it's like really hard for us to understand for some reason. The way in which we justify. Well, I'm loving these people and I'm doing justice, so it's okay if I hate those people.
Right.
When I think about what people might say about this, they'll say, well, I'm loving myself by creating boundaries to keep myself away from those people.
Right.
And Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. So they're actually justifying their actions by saying, well, I don't really need to love them because I'm actually just creating boundaries, so I don't need to love them. I mean, what do you say about that? How does that land with you?
I mean, oftentimes when people say that, it's as previous to poor experiences with that person, whether it's abuse or, go down the list of bad things that could happen in a relationship,
Of course.
family dynamics. There's like, I'm going to set up boundaries. And, this is the classic Christian thing to say, I love them, but it doesn't mean I have to like them. Jesus never said I had to like that person.
Right. So
But
what
it's
does
like,
that really mean?
actually, you have to serve them,
Right.
and care for them, and that go down the list.
Right.
And love is stronger than liking.
It's super sensitive because I get it. It's like, wait, you're asking me to love the person that raped me? You're asking me to love the dad that abused me? You're asking me to love, it's hard. It's extremely hard to do that, but I think that's the kind of love. And again, what we're not saying is, you have to go be their best friend.
Sure.
And invite them back into your life to continue that abuse. No, but what does it look like to love that person?
Right.
And I think these are some of the harder texts to wrestle with and reckon with. Because the Samaritan person, they did not love each other. This was straight up their enemy. Like, according to whatever, like the Jews versus the Samaritans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, they did not love each other. I always think about, Romans 12, where if your enemy is hungry, give them something to eat. If they're thirsty, give them a drink. And in doing this, you will heap burning coals on their head. And it's just like, oh man, that's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a thought just when it comes to the whole conversation around boundaries. I think that, originally, the concept of putting boundaries was oftentimes used as a response if someone had been in an abusive situation or a truly toxic situation. Yeah. But I think what I see now is the conversation has moved to just it's I think a result of the radical individualism of our society, right? It's
this is what I was asking about.
A rejection of community and kind of it is the putting of the self first and putting boundaries in order to essentially protect yourself, which in and of itself doesn't sound like a problem. But when Jesus asks you to forsake your life for another, to put others before yourself, and really calls us to, he calls us to live in radical community, which I think the idea of putting boundaries up, it's not biblical.
Right.
At all.
Well, I could actually say too, the priest and the Levite actually have boundaries here.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
We don't know what their reasoning was.
And they might have even, Mandy said this earlier before we got in here, they might have even felt compassion for the person.
Right, exactly.
But they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Compassion, because compassion's the first,
Yeah, well, compassion versus sympathy. Sympathy is I feel bad for that person. But compassion, I think, is another level, but also
it should
But
move us to action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Compassion
Jesus was
without action
motivated
is
by
still
compassion.
it's incomplete.
Most people just have sympathy. It's that sucks.
And we just have language for it, where we
man.
call it I just really I feel, and we think feeling the emotion is
enough.
doing justice or
Right.
doing something because I understand,
I
I
hear
feel
you,
where
bro.
you're
Yeah.
at, but it's like you said in the beginning, I have it here. Compassion can be felt in the gut, but mercy needs to be enacted by the body.
Yeah.
Shout
led
out
to action.
to Jared's new iPad Pro we got.
Woo!
He's really excited
Yeah,
about
just
it.
You're like, I
casual.
love
All these guys
highlight.
got nice tech up here. I just got my mind.
Well, mine's
Dude, your
a
mind's
5-year-old
great.
MacBook Air, so
No, but
thank you.
I think you're right. I think we do. I think we do justify these things, and I think we do say to ourselves, "Well, I'm not like that because I'm doing it in this realm," as
Right.
though we can divide up our lives into subsections.
Oh,
Even
100%.
another thought of this kind of self-love thing is I'm not ready or in a place where I can do that yet, or I can't give myself or to people around me yet. I need to focus on myself to get to some place where then I can serve
Right.
people, but nowhere is that what Jesus says.
Yeah.
He just is going to do. And if that person, the Samaritan person, would have walked by and said,
Totally.
I can't, I'm just not in
100%.
this place, I'm not equipped, then that person would have died. But he, like we were talking about earlier, he thought about the half-dead person before he even thought about himself or where he was at.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think love has to be outward. So I think we've done a good job here of differentiating between we are not here to condone abuse or violence that's been done against you. Those boundaries need to be set. I think what we're trying to critique here is using boundaries, like Mandy said, as a justification for doing nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really often, I think that anytime our love turns inward and not outward, it's corrupted.
Right.
And by that, I just mean this. I don't know about you guys, but when I serve other people, that's when I feel most alive.
Right.
When I come back from
Absolutely.
serving at a soup kitchen or sitting with a homeless person, I feel as though I've become a better human being. And that's
experiencing
because my
homelessness.
love is outward. And yet look at us culturally on a broad cultural level. We're individuals who exist in our own homes who are trying to figure out self-love. Anxiety and depression has skyrocketed.
Right.
Because we're not designed for that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know how that lands for you. I'd love to hear a little more about this, and then we'll move on. But I mean, just this idea. I want to keep challenging this idea of love turning inward, just loving me, but not loving anybody else.
Well, I think that part of the problem is that, when we look around, it absolutely makes sense that people would think that that is how to heal themselves, or if they're struggling with something, to look inward, because our culture is obsessed with self-love,
Right.
with self-care, which in and of themselves, again, are not terrible things, but we have...
the pendulum swing towards
Well,
that,
and that's
though.
exactly it. We've
It's
accepted.
it's such a buzzword.
Yeah.
Self-care. I'm just like, okay.
Well, because I think we've accepted a lie, like societally, that
Yeah.
if we just take really good care of ourselves,
Right.
we
Ourselves.
will.
Yeah,
right.
we will be the people that the world needs.
Right.
Baloney.
When it's like you literally aren't thinking. Like, if maybe just try thinking about the world.
Yeah.
Instead of like focusing on yourself,
course.
and then
Yeah.
you can actually receive healing and like freedom and become that person that you want to be through the service of others.
Yeah.
And that's a lot more Christ-like, I think.
Of course.
And what we're even created for. You go. Yeah,
Sorry, no. I just have a question. Maybe I'm playing devil's advocate.
No,
I don't
go for
know.
it.
But I just hear these questions or this thought of like, okay, at what point then, I guess, is self-love terrible, or like on the opposite end of like, I'm actually becoming more unhealthy and like hurting people. So, because I think that's
Because of what?
Because
of loving
of,
themselves too much? Or
yeah, I think there's like all these different levels to it. Some
Right.
people would say like, oh, I give of myself all the time, so I just need to, have self-care or just have a moment to myself, so that I'm not hurting people. I just hear like, and so maybe we can like, I don't know, talk a little bit about defining
Jesus
self-love
does
or
retreat.
these things. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But what
So
does
how do
he?
you do
What,
that in a
what does
healthy
he
way?
retreat to do?
Exactly.
To
with
sleep,
his Father.
to eat, and to be with the Father. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
Not to watch
in
Netflix,
he's
he
in
just
the
lied.
presence. He's actually doing things that give him life, so that he can go out and keep doing the ministry that he was
Yeah.
doing.
Right.
And
I
those
think-
are, in some ways, the outlier.
Yeah.
Right.
We have way more stories of Jesus performing miracles and going towards the people than we do about Jesus sort of isolating himself. It's fascinating. Modern neuroscience would suggest that if you suffer alone, that's when trauma enters into your story.
Oh, totally.
But if you suffer within the context of community, you're actually far less likely to experience trauma.
Right.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it.
And that's just coming back to this idea of like, what does it look like for us to be within the context of community to experience love? Like, instead of being so obsessed with figuring out how to love myself, what if I let other people love me? And what if I love other people?
Yeah.
Then something radical starts to happen.
Right.
So I want to move on a little bit here. So obviously we have a priest and a Levite, and the third here is a Samaritan.
Yeah.
And this is a really interesting paradigm because this formula is a little bit like, I don't know, what are those old jokes? Like a priest and a pastor and a rabbi walk into a bar. It's like there's a particular formula that Jewish people would expect to hear here. Like
Right.
if you hear priest and Levite, the next one you're going to hear is a Jew,
Right.
an Israelite.
Yeah.
But that's not what Jesus does. He subverts this paradigm. So when you hear this, it would have been shocking to you.
Right.
And I want to get into why. So Mandy, help us understand a little bit here about who the Samaritans were in relation to the Jewish people. Because I think that's going to offer a lot of context.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost.
I mean, essentially, just if you could think of like the ultimate beef of all time, it's between the Samaritans and the Jews. So they kind of thought of each other the same way. Like, they both had a lot of hatred towards each other. They both kind of thought that they had correct theology. Both thought that they were like had the truth, understood the Torah better than the other. And really, there was just this long history of disdain towards the other. And so it's pretty much, to a Jew, a Samaritan is like as bad as it gets, like the scum of the earth. Just they can't. I don't know how else to put it. I guess there's just there's so much animosity between the two, and there's just no respect.
It's
like on even a human level, they're just it's
It's like Flames fans. I'm an Oilers fan.
I knew that was
Can't
coming.
take them.
I often use, when I think of this relationship, I think it is provocative and unfortunate, but I think that both groups would have seen the other as like half-breeds.
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
Like
yeah.
not the true people, kind of
They're
subhuman.
like, you were a mistake. No,
yeah, I
you
mean,
were a
basically,
mistake.
you're a mistake.
Right, yeah.
You don't have it right. You're completely wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what is Jesus doing here? If what they expect to hear is a priest and a Levite
And a Jew.
and one of my people who does the right thing, what does Jesus say here? It's like
psych.
a priest and a pastor and a Muslim, and the
Yeah.
Muslim is the one. And in our world, we
Right
see
now. Which
is,
such
like, real.
xenophobia
Right. Yeah.
towards the other. Now, xenophobia
What's
is just
xenophobia?
a fear of the stranger or a fear of a foreigner,
Right.
a fear of the one who is other.
Yeah.
So Jesus is obviously here combating this idea.
Yeah, he's trying to
Step on some toes. He was not afraid to do that.
No.
He's offering us a picture of their biggest enemy
Yeah.
doing the work that they themselves should have been doing.
Yeah.
How does that land for you?
Oof.
It hurts some days.
Think with me of, I think we all have people in our life, unfortunately. This is one thing that I'm trying to challenge all the time. We have people that we put outside of the realm of redemption.
Oh, yeah.
That's a way of saying we have people that we've said God can't save them. And Jesus is taking that person, whoever comes into your mind, Jesus taking that person, and they're the hero or heroine of the story.
Actually.
Yeah.
I think it just subconsciously, it just shows like, it just reveals to me how much I haven't allowed maybe areas of his love to actually be what I'm living from.
Yeah.
Because subconsciously you can put people in these boxes
Yeah.
or like be like, or just even sometimes the language that we use where we're like, well, are they saved? As if like they're not capable. And I mean, obviously there's like a level of like partnership with, relationship with the Lord that again gives us this supernatural ability, but just like we can just put people down or put people in a box and it's like Jesus is like that person, like that's whether it's your enemy or your whatever, like just inviting us into this idea that like that's my brother, that's my sister.
Yeah.
But I think just with like language or how we categorize people, we like fail to see that like, dude, that's my brother or
Right.
this is my sister,
Yeah.
and Jesus is trying to like reveal that. I'm like, I mean, we read it in the story and it's like, okay, wow, but like in my context right now, if some dude was to walk in and be like, just whatever, has a Make America Great Again hat, and I'm supposed to be cheesed because I'm black, and be like, what do you mean this? But just like, before I put anybody in a box or start saying anything
Right.
or just writing somebody off or being like, he's probably not Christian, he's probably this or probably that. Well, probably is,
It
actually.
probably is a Christian.
Never mind. Yeah, not probably. I don't know, just whatever
Sorry,
things I
edit
could
that
say.
part
It's
out.
like, that's my brother or that's my sister.
Right.
I think that's the paradigm that
Yeah.
is shocking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we think of xenophobia, the fear of the other, we think of like older people who are like, I'm just afraid that all the Muslims are going to come in and take our jobs.
Sure.
Or some ridiculous statement. And for those of you who are listening right now, I am not saying that. I'm quoting somebody having said something like
Somebody's
that.
gonna clip
Just to be
that.
clear, in case you want to.
Even then, in that sense, I was like, I know that person, I know the type, I know what they
Well,
look
yeah,
like.
I mean,
I'm
I
like,
think that we
these
have
freaking
people in
guys.
our lives who are like this. It's interesting. Hospitality in our current Christian culture has come to mean you invite your friends over that think like you and dress like you and act like you, and you have dinner with them. You have good drinks with them.
Yeah.
Hospitality in the Bible is a combination of the word love for stranger. Jesus is saying you invite your enemy to the table and you turn your enemy into your friend through food.
Hello.
It's like, I have never heard that until
Bruh.
you were talking about that today. I just feel like that is such a radical understanding of hospitality that we, even like when I think about like in church context, like we have hospitality teams, we
Right.
have like the gift of hospitality.
green
I
room.
think of the gift of hospitality as like who of my friends is really good at like serving others and like
Right.
having like when we go to their house, they think of everything, they put out all the
Right, yeah,
snacks
yeah, yeah.
and stuff,
Good
you know, like
vibes.
Of
yeah,
course.
Great
which
music.
I mean is obviously not it's part of it, but to think like
Got it,
true
thanks,
hospitality is to be able to show that kindness to
Yeah.
Everyone.
your enemy.
Absolutely.
Like that is
Yeah.
So can
that's
I
radical.
tell you one of the most hospitable statements in the New Testament? Paul says, while you were an enemy, Christ died for you.
Right, yeah.
That's hospitality.
That gets you.
Philoxenos, that's turning the enemy into a friend.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Jesus is here actually offering the enemy, and he's saying the enemy was the friend.
Yeah.
The enemy
powerful.
did the redeeming.
Yeah.
The enemy paid out of their own pocket
Yeah.
to see
Yeah.
the person live.
Yeah.
And shots being fired, especially against, it was the priest and the Levite, the leaders in their religious sect and culture and crew, that it's like, no, the top, pointing towards sometimes how the top can completely miss it. Because
Yeah.
at that time, like a lot of corruption within that area and in cahoots with the Roman Empire and and they just completely missed the reality that there was somebody in need
Yeah.
there, and I gotta go do stuff. And
Yeah.
I think people could even say the same now when it comes to the church and when it comes to like different things, like injustice happening. Like, people would maybe put the church in that box of the
course.
Levite
Of
and the
crossing the
priest of
street
like
kind of thing.
missing it and not doing anything.
I put me in
Well,
that box.
yeah, I think, yeah.
Yes.
Not even
Yeah,
necessarily the
I mean, that's
church.
exactly right.
But I mean, like, on the outside.
No,
like,
I'm
people
with
could
you. I
easily-
think we have to think of ourselves in these categories, and I think we have to think of our corporate
Totally,
selves together in these
Yeah.
categories. I think it's really important. One of the common misconceptions about this parable that people often chat about is how the Levite and the priest didn't do anything because they didn't want to become ritually impure.
Right.
But if you actually do some good reading, you find that it was like one of the highest priorities within Judaism.
Yeah.
That if somebody is in a ditch or if they're dead, you bury
bury
the
the
body,
dead.
you take care of them.
Totally. I read that too. It was just like
Even more so
not
than the
becoming
Sabbath.
not becoming unclean was important, but at the end of the day, if no one else was going to help that person, whether they were dead or alive, the you going to help or to bury that body trumps anything else, because
Yeah.
it was a very high value for
Absolutely.
Jews. And
Yeah.
so it's a
Yeah,
broken argument.
Amy Jill Levine in her book Stories by Jesus, she says, it has to override every other concern, including the Sabbath. When I hear her say that, I think of Jesus saying, "What is the Sabbath for?
Right.
We want to give life on the Sabbath."
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus is combating this very idea in his own actions.
Yeah.
So Jesus is, subverting paradigms. He's offering us, a crazy picture of this group of people. And I mean, Jerry, you were just there. When we think about injustice, in two ways. When we think about what it actually looks like to be, the Samaritan person who is doing the thing that we're actually called to do. But then when we also think on the other end of, we all have priests and Levites in our life that we all want to point the finger at, who are not giving of their own resources, who aren't doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, all of those things. I mean, I don't know, what advice do we have? What thoughts come to mind when we think about that? We see two different pictures here. And it's easy to point the finger and say, you're not doing what I think you
Right.
should be doing, and I'm going to say the same to you, and there's a complete breakdown.
I mean, it really just is a vicious cycle, because ultimately it's a circle of not pointing the finger in here.
Yeah.
Right.
And even the lawyer, like, he's probably a good guy in the story that asked the question,
Right.
and it's like, he's thinking, oh yeah, I've been doing this, and it's like, no, actually, let's point it in here. Who is the good person? And Jesus did it in such a pretty gentle way, like, well, who's the good person? Who do you think?
Good teacher, right?
Yeah, great teacher, and it's always looking in here. And I think that's sometimes the common thing that we can do. And I'm completely guilty of this, is pointing out there.
Right.
Love it.
And not in here, and trying to fix the broken system, then fix myself and be fixed by the Holy Spirit. And I think that's a huge mistake in our generation, because we just then think, and this is what I was thinking, maybe even the priest and the Levite, oh, somebody else will do that.
Right.
Oh, somebody else will take care of that problem. Somebody else that's going to come along next. And again, the people of God in that story missed it, and their enemy picked it up.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I don't want to be shown up by my enemy.
Yeah, of course.
Like, oh, that's not good. I got to look in here first.
And maybe Jesus is inviting us to say, your enemy actually
Is your friend.
is not only a friend, but is going to do good.
Right.
Yeah.
Your enemy has good to do.
Oh, and that's the thing, man. Some of the most charitable, hospitable, kind. I
Oh,
was
yeah,
literally thinking of a buddy of mine, a guy named Nick Croak in high school. Not whatsoever, even religious at all. But the dude was way more generous than I was.
Right.
He was extremely kind. He loved people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's some really good people out there that are not believers that do incredible things
course.
for the world.
Yeah, of course.
But we still think like, it's
Not
like,
as much.
they're not doing it for the kingdom of God,
They didn't say Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting how we bought into that paradigm, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, I think the Bible teaches a twofold thing. I think we actually have to have verbal witness. I think that Paul teaches this. I think the book of Revelation is very clear about this. Just action is not enough. You need action and verbal witness. So you need to see it and say it and do it. You have to do all of it. I think this story, though, is confronting us with like your enemy maybe is your perceived enemy. That's usually the language I use, because no one is actually your enemy. Your perceived enemy is the one who's doing the good. But I also want to say this. I think that we all need to pause, because I think you're saying this, James, and I think it's helpful. our propensity is always to read ourselves as the hero or heroine of the story.
Right.
So it's like we read the story of David and Goliath and we are David.
We're
Yeah.
David.
You're not David. You need a David. His name is Jesus, and he will slay the Goliaths, but you are never going to be David. Good luck. You're somebody else hiding behind the luggage. But the
I was
reality,
pretty good with the slingshot.
the reality here, I just
I'm
want
a
to say
stone.
this.
I'm a
Like,
stone.
I think we need to slow down and
I'm
say
like a 5.
we are probably the priest and the Levite, or we're the lawyer that's trying to justify ourselves.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
But I think that we need to slow down from just saying we are the Samaritan.
Right.
Oh,
And I think if
sure.
that confronts anyone listening or us, I think we just have to ask the Holy Spirit why.
Yeah.
Right.
What are you talking about? I serve.
Right, exactly. I think we all want to do that
person I
instead of
see.
having that posture that says there's always more that I can do and there's always more transformation that needs
totally.
to occur in my heart.
I
Well,
also,
and I think that that's
my bad. No.
No,
I
you
want
go.
you. I
No,
want you to go.
No, you go.
I want you to go.
Cody, what do you think?
all I was going to say is.
But how about
I-
both talk at the same time and see if people can figure it out?
Exactly.
It's
I'm
been
just kidding.
done.
Please don't do that.
No, let's not. I want to hear Emmanuel.
All I was going to say is I think that that's kind of the challenge with every parable, and honestly,
Yeah.
like most messages that you would hear if you go to church is like, do we turn the finger inward or like look outward? Because realistically, both are probably true. You know, I mean, yes, there are people in the world who aren't doing what they should or could
Yeah.
with the resources that they have, but do you really think that's what the Lord is trying to do in you? You know what I mean? Like, I think that it's always more beneficial to us to look inward
Yeah.
Yeah.
and to consider how we miss the mark or how we
Right.
are so often the Levite / the
Yeah.
priest.
And who we're prejudiced towards and who we have a bias
Exactly.
towards.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's so big
And like, who are the people? And they're unsuspecting people.
Yeah.
That it's like, it's not like, oh, a people group, I really don't like them.
Oh,
Right.
But it may
Sure.
just be that, again, just whatever. Like,
yeah.
I'm just thinking of some funny examples. Of like,
I think
whatever.
the theme in all of these parables and like all of these conversations is like the new humanity and the kingdom of heaven that Jesus is telling us about
Yeah.
has to have unity, and that's what he's like all about. And so I even think like looking at the Good Samaritan, recognizing as I look inward that I might be a Levite or a priest or whatever, that person is, like you said, is a perceived enemy, but in the kingdom of heaven is actually not my enemy and doesn't have to be. And so recognizing that person's win is also my win. And if that person's loss is also my loss. And so if I can be inspired and not like actually, because we can also look away from this and be like, okay, well, I don't want my enemies showing me up. No offense to what you said, James, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
and
it's
like
good.
make it a competition
Right,
thing.
sure.
But then just will have us more prideful and trying to like prove something
Yeah.
rather than
Right.
like allowing the love and compassion of Christ
Absolutely.
to move
I mean,
me
and
to
then
that.
take it out more broad than that, not even in the context of the church. What is just about dialogue between Christians and Muslims or atheists and
Yeah.
agnostics and Christians? Like, if you can begin to believe that the other is capable of doing good,
Right.
then all of a sudden you open yourself up for a conversation.
Exactly.
And conversation is the starting point to really great things.
Yeah.
In the same way that's why hospitality is about, enemies and strangers at
Yeah.
table.
Yeah.
Because food will reconcile all things.
Oh, ain't that the
Heart-
truth?
There's a reason why at the
better
end of the
preach.
story, everyone gathers at the messianic banquet.
Yeah.
It's a meal at the end.
Yeah.
Trying
I
to
think
eat.
that's really important. Okay, so we're going to start landing the plane here. But maybe we can chat for a second. And we've been sort of tangentially talking about this both in this conversation, but in other conversations. I think for so many of us, following Jesus has been a set of ideas or doctrines or principles that we just need to think the right things and have the right doctrine. And that's important. We need good doctrine, sure. But with that, we haven't thought about following Jesus as just like a way of life.
Right.
That Jesus is offering us, Jesus is the greatest philosopher to ever live. Truly. Jesus offers us. And philosophers in the ancient world, you would follow your philosopher, you would learn from them, just like a rabbi. So as a rabbi, Jesus is inviting us into a certain way of being in the world. So maybe what advice do you have for those people who are just maybe having a hard time, I don't know, reconciling with an enemy, or maybe these teachings from Jesus just don't seem very palatable? And maybe people are thinking, well, if that's what the kingdom of God is like, I don't want to be a part of it, Or maybe they could self-identify and say, because of the way that I'm living, maybe I'm not as much a part of that kingdom as I think I am.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe what comes to mind, or what advice do you have as we begin to sort of land the plane?
Yeah.
The first thing I think of is even just how you were talking before about how so often like when our tendency is to serve ourselves, when we do choose to serve others and choose to serve the community around us, oftentimes it actually is so life-giving to us.
Right.
And I think that like at the end of the day, what that communicates to us is just like, if that sounds overwhelming to you, which makes sense because it's countercultural, and what the narrative that we're hearing is the opposite.
Yeah, of course.
But like, I firmly believe it's what we were created to do.
Yeah.
And when you do what you were created to do, it actually will give you life.
Absolutely.
And I think that as much as like in our minds, sometimes that's hard to wrap our minds around. And like, oh, I'm already so exhausted. Like now you're telling me I have to go like serve all these people
Right.
or like shift
Totally.
my mindset completely. That could seem overwhelming, but like, I guess my advice would be like, just try and like learn and see that it actually will bring you so much life because it's what you're made to do.
Yeah. If you just debunk the myth that says if I pour out, like, you know, I'm never going to be poured
You'll
back.
be depleted
I'll be
or-
depleted. Like when you do that, the Lord always pours back into you. And of course, there's opportunity to abuse yourself and not lean on the Lord's strength and, you know, rely on your own skills and talents, and then you get burnt out. And I think that's where all the self-care in the church comes from. It's because people just weren't leaning on the Holy Spirit. They were leaning on their own skills.
Yes, that's right.
But when you actually partner with the Holy Spirit and use his strength, you get filled. You get filled as you pour out. And if you don't, then you're always going to be constantly looking for more energy to go and do something. It's like,
Right.
just stop it. Just go do something. Just go try something. Like, change is good. Did you donate some clothes? The Reman Center, our next guest, Dave, like, hey, would you come with me on Sunday nights to go put on a chapel at a prison? Because that's what we're going to do in January. Like, to the Dream Center, whatever it is, like, just go and do it. Just try it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think too the thing, and you said this, James. I think we always want to remember the Holy Spirit is foundational to this.
Yeah.
We're not giving you a new law here. We're asking you to be a person of love who's empowered by the Spirit.
Yeah. And the thing that I always remember, I'm like, oh man, if I think that I'm tired, like, let's just look at the Apostles' Paul life, how he was poured out like a drink offering, he says. Like, I poured myself out. Or I think about even my family in South Africa that are all ministers for free. Like my cousin Clayton, he has his own business, works full time. He's a pastor of his youth ministry at his church, and he oversees 75 churches and their youth ministries. He works 80 hours a week, and he doesn't even take a salary at his church. And he's got a bigger youth group than I do. And it's like,
You don't have a youth group anymore.
then I did. Anyways, cheers to the youth pastor. What's up? But I just then look at my life and I'm like, oof. I just don't want to go serve down once a month.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, yikes, James.
That's the fruit.
Yeah. Like, stop being so
And
self-righteous.
so this story of Jesus is a story of justice. The story of Jesus is what it looks like to be a people who have been swept up into the Trinitarian community of faith, hope, and love, who are citizens of the kingdom of God, who are then even radically loving enemies, who are even radically giving of all of themselves to see someone become well. I'm so moved by the Samaritan's line. You know, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper. He says, whatever debts he incurs, I will pay.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
I'll repay.
Yeah,
I'll
because
pay
he's-
for it.
He's also setting himself up for this to be a long term.
Yeah.
He's not just saying like, "Hey, I dropped him off. He's out of my hands,"
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
that's sometimes
did
what
my
we
thing.
do.
Here's
right?
money
It's
for
like,
a couple of days.
yeah,
Thanks.
like I did my part, and like check, I'm a good person. Like I'm gonna just ride off into the sunset. It's like no, he actually says like here, like I'm gonna come back and make sure he's good, and I will incur any debt that you
Which is crazy.
And so it's showing that he is setting himself up, and I think that that's the heart is that, like you were saying, Jesus is not asking us to just like do a good deed every now and then. He's like, no, I'm asking you to like actually shift your mindset and live this.
Yeah.
And that's
To allow, like Jared said earlier, and like we've been saying in this series, to see heaven come on earth through our actions.
Right.
How does the invisible God become known? Only through a people who embody his ways.
Yeah.
Right? And so, as we end, I mean, maybe just, with a couple of questions. Are we able to care for our enemies? Can we love our enemies? Or would we rather blow up their cities? Or would we rather discredit them? Or would we rather, Jesus is saying, will you bind up their wounds? Will you love the broken and the downtrodden? And can we maybe imagine just for a single second that person might be capable of doing the same for you? I mean, what a radical thought.
yeah.
And so I think Jesus, ends here. He's telling this story in response to this lawyer. And he ends, and Jesus saying it's not about having all the theological precision in the world. It's about doing likewise. And so I think that's Jesus' commission for us as his people, that compassion can be felt in your gut. You can feel it and walk by and say, wow, I feel really bad for that person.
Yeah.
But compassion has to move towards mercy in action.
Yeah.
Because that's who God is.
Yeah.
And if we're going to be a people who are going to be like God, kingdom citizens, to love our enemies, we have to pray for our persecutors, we have to live this lifestyle, go above and beyond.
Yeah.
And that's when we're going to see kingdom come. That's when we're going to see revival come, when we're actually a people who are doing justice, not because it's our duty, but because we've been so radically transformed that we actually
Right.
become
Did it for
a
us.
people of justice.
Yeah.
And that's actually what Paul says. You know, he's made you into the righteousness of God. The word righteousness is also the word justice.
Yeah.
God has made you into his very justice. So yeah, I mean, as we land,
on,
I don't know
preach,
if you want
Cody.
to pray for us,
Preach.
James, or pray to this end, you know, that we could be a people who go and do likewise.
Yeah, love to. Lord, we come before you and ask humbly. We need your help badly
Yeah.
in our narcissistic center, me, I'm the center of the world culture that we unfortunately get influenced by, and it's actually trendy to do that. God, I pray for a renewal of our mind.
Yeah. Thank you.
And a transformation of our heart, God, by the work of your Spirit, so
Yeah.
that we, myself included, first, God, would be like the man in this story that did what was right.
Yeah.
Did what was right. Did what you would do, and did what you did for us. And God, would we and everyone listening and watching be convicted and compelled by the life that you did and lived for us, life that you laid down for us, that we could also go and do the same. So God, grace upon all of us. Help us by your Spirit. And would we go and do the little things and not expect to be the next Mother Teresa overnight, but God, again, take little steps, closer to the lifestyle of Jesus, and do that by your grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
And the thing, too, is, Tehillah community, we are doing things like this, that, again, life is not meant to be lived alone. You're invited to the table. We can do a lot better and more together. There's a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's what we're doing. So if you want to join us in some of these justice initiatives that we're partnering with, like Change is Good, and then our next guest, again, is from the Remand Center. Then our next guest is Kirsty from Emerge and David Punaminiel from Lighthouse Voyage. And we're going to be talking about some human trafficking that not only goes on across the globe, but also here. If you want to get involved with that, please hit us up in the comment section. Email us on our website, tehillahyc.ca. And if you want to sow, if you maybe time right now is limited and that you can't, or you're in another city and you can't come join us here, you can do it in your own city, or you can sow and give into this community that is trying all our best to go and do that. So big shout out to the tech team. Thank you, everyone, our production team. Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Manny. Thank you, Jer. And we love you, and we'll see you later at our next episode. Peace.
Deuces.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us today at Tehillah Talks. We hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, we just want to encourage you to like it, share it, give us a review on podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you stream this. And we just want to encourage you to also follow us. And if you want to sow into what these conversations are doing for our city here in Calgary, we want to encourage you to sow. You can check us out and give at tehillahyc.ca and get involved with what is going on here via Tehillah. Thanks so much. Love you so much. Have a great day.